Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with leadership and digital transformation expert John Rossman. He is the author of 4 books on leadership and business innovation, including the bestseller, The Amazon Way. He is an early Amazon executive who played a key role in launching the Amazon Marketplace business in 2002. Today, he is a leading keynote speaker on leadership for innovation, transformation, and artificial intelligence, and is giving over 200 keynotes to worldwide audiences. He's a great interview. Enjoy.
Great to meet you, man. Thank you for taking a minute out for the program today.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
So before we get into your life and your work and just everything that makes you who you are, I want to know, the last 3 years was quite a thing for all of us living through COVID. How did you make it through that time period, and how has it changed you now that we're entering this post-pandemic phase of our existence?
Yeah, I think, we just really tried to find the silver linings kind of through, the pandemic and, some of the upheaval and everything. And so we were fortunate in that everybody's work was able to adapt pretty readily. My keynote business obviously was impacted and, started doing complete remote keynotes. But the upside of that was I was able to start doing international keynotes. I've never really wanted to travel a lot internationally, so I've always declined most international keynotes. But, since they were all remote, it's like, hey, great, now I can do all these international keynotes remotely and everything. So I just, always try to find the silver linings and, adapt and improvise. I think that's the opportunity to just figure out a way to get things done. So no doubt it had a lot of impact, but, my MO is always just, try to find the silver linings out of something that's a real disaster.
So, on paper, it makes sense to me what you do for a living to a good degree, but let's make it make sense to everyone. If I put you in front of a bunch of third graders at a career day and one of the kids looks up and says, hey, what do you do for a living? How would you answer that child?
Yeah. I help business leaders improve their business by doing new things. That's how I help business leaders and executives. And I do that by A, through the books and the newsletter that I publish, B, by giving keynotes, C, by doing workshops with teams, and D, through consulting engagements.
So when you were in the third grade, what was your dream? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Wow. That is a long time ago. I was at St. John Fisher grade school in Portland, Oregon. Probably had a fairly stern nun that was probably a bit annoyed with me because I was a very active young boy. I always wanted to be an athlete, right? And so I think if you asked me, I probably would have said, like, I want to be a basketball player, I want to be a baseball player, or something like that. But I don't really know if I thought about like what I wanted to be growing up a whole lot. I don't remember that. I do remember I had one friend who in first grade said, I'm going to be a surgeon, and he became a surgeon. And it always just I was like, God, I wish I had a specific calling like that. But, I actually think, what I've figured out is, kind of my calling and my superpower is like, I like learning new things. And by the career that I've had, really what that's oriented towards is really getting to learn a lot of new businesses, a lot of new things, a lot of new techniques, and then helping to let others improve their business by taking advantage of those things.
So I'm in Kansas City. I grew up in a little town called Liberty, north of Kansas City. And there was a guy that I knew in high school. His name was Christopher Elbow. And I remember asking him one time, we were just friends, no best friends or anything. And I was like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And he said, I want to be a world-renowned chef. And just the way he said it, I just was like, I didn't even know you cooked. Like, I was like, okay. He has actually become one of the top chocolatiers in Kansas City. He's been on, Oprah bought all of his stuff. Obama has bought stuff from him, other presidents, other people. He really genuinely has gone on to become a world-renowned chef.
Yeah, people like that have just always astounded me. I've never thought about being an author, and it was in 2012. I had a client of mine at the Gates Foundation. I'd been an early executive at Amazon. I left Amazon in late 2005. I had a client at the Gates Foundation, and he came to me and he goes, you do a nice job of taking all the little anecdotes and strategies from Amazon and delicately inserting them into our work. I really think you ought to write a book. And I was like, wow, interesting. And the smartest thing I did, I listened to him, and B, I talked him into being my partner on these books. And so, I guess the point is that even if you don't have kind of that early calling or orientation, there might come opportunities to do some really new and different and very fulfilling things in life. Like, just not everybody has that singular calling early on, and I think that's okay. At least I've gotten completely comfortable with, like, that's just the way I roll.
So let's go back to your childhood, where you were born and raised, and how these seeds of business and motivation and helping others, how did all this happen and grow into who you are today?
Well, this type of question where I go, I'm an engineer, not a psychologist, so I don't know if I really understand, how somebody, comes to who they are, where I came. But I would say the thing that I was the youngest of four kids, very lower middle class family, and I always just wanted to see the world and experience and be active. And I just remember people, more or less, the general theme was like, John, don't have too high of expectations and stuff. And so I always felt like I've been, kind of like, I can do something better than this. I can do something better than this. I can do something better than this. And I think that's been, my general orientation, not so much to prove people wrong, but just I developed an orientation of like, hey, don't let the status quo define who you are. And so, and I was very fortunate to have some athletic coaches and some teachers who really pushed me. And so it was a combination of both, believing in me, as well as pushing me. And I think that that's what I really needed was like somebody with some high expectations. And I found that completely engaging. And that really happened for me in high school. I went to a Jesuit high school in Beaverton, Oregon, and I was very fortunate to get to go to it. And that's where I really, I think, took a step forward into, being confident, learning how to learn, and like, hey, I can do more than what I think others expect out of me.
So who's really been an ultimate hero or role model for you in life?
Yeah, great question. I don't know if I have a singular name, but especially in my career, so early in my career, I was at a couple consulting firms. I was at Anderson Consulting and Arthur Andersen. Then I was at Amazon, and then I was at a management consulting firm called Alvarez & Marsal, and I left A&M in 2017, and so I'm just on my own now. But I've always had partners who have really helped me develop in and see kind of like, hey, your natural orientation at sometimes is a superpower, but sometimes that kind of works against you and everything, right? And so I had at both Arthur Andersen, and he was a partner of mine at Alvarez & Marsal too, was just very good at helping me see kind of like, hey, just be aware of like, that particular orientation isn't always the orientation. So like one in particular that he helped me out with was like, I was always, especially when my kids were young, just hyper efficient with my time. And 90% of the time, that was a really good orientation. But when you're in some conversations, and especially when you're the senior person and you're trying to mentor somebody else, you need to, allow for, he always called it unproductive, productive time with somebody, right? And so like that was kind of a rewiring I had to do a little bit. It was just, make time to just not have an agenda and just spend time with somebody, especially somebody who wants some mentorship or some guidance. And so I've just been very fortunate, especially in my business, to have people that I've learned from. And, that's where I've kind of picked up kind of my multi-sided toolkit of, whether it's product development or process design or sales and marketing or communication. I always picture myself as a multi-tool capability, not an expert in anyone, but my superpower is in the synthesis of all of them.
You had mentioned sports and you're in business. There's so many stories of rising to the top and rags to riches kind of thing. If you could meet anybody alive on the planet, someone you really admire, who would you love to meet and talk to, be around for a little bit?
Well, Peter Drucker would be the person that I would love to spend some time with, because he just, I have a little bit of Peter Drucker in me, and so in no way am I saying I'm on par or anywhere close to Peter Drucker. But he was an advisor, he was an author, he really thought about how to think, and that's what I do a lot now is, hey, not just come up with a strategy or a better approach for a problem or an innovation process, but how do we actually think about how we're doing this? Because you can come to a deeper level of understanding, and you can really drive permanent change in clients by slowing down a little bit and thinking about the principles underneath it. And so I've found some of his books and writings and work to just be, very in tune with how I think about not just running great businesses, but what's it mean to be a real leader in today's businesses.
And any great leader has a lot of motivation to get where they want to go. What's that motivation for you? What gets you up in the morning and makes you want to accomplish what your vision is?
Yeah, it's changed over time. If I'm being really honest. Early on, when I was young, it was just like, hey, I wanted to see the world and I wanted to do really interesting work. When my family was young, it was really like, hey, we got to float this household, and I got to create a stable and great environment for my family. Now I've progressed some, and I don't have all the pressure of that. Now it's like, okay, how do I really do substantial work, like impactful work, and I want to be in control of kind of this next phase of my career. So I'm in my late 50s now. I love what I do. I feel great. I want to keep working. Okay, I got to be in control and create the environment where I get to keep doing this for as long as I want. So my motivations have changed over time.
So what is your favorite client success story that you've been involved with?
Well, probably the one that's easiest to point to was, my work at Amazon. So I was an operator at Amazon. I was as an executive at Amazon, and I was leading the launch of the marketplace business in 2002. So Amazon was a very small company at that point, and there was a lot of naysayers, both internal and external to Amazon. And, we created the marketplace business, and it really took, this balance between having patience for the business development, but a high sense of urgency to make progress every single day. And that orientation is a real delicate one to develop in a team and in a business. But then after I left Amazon, I mentioned I got to do a bunch of work at the Gates Foundation, and just some of our primary work was working with grantees that the foundation had funded and helping them operationalize and execute some of the programs. And I learned so much about nonprofit work and how to add value there and their missions. And so that was some really great work. And then, probably, if I'm being like my personally most rewarding that I've developed into is I love the process of writing a good book. And it's a struggle, but it puts you into the high performance zone because you're capable of doing it, but it's not completely comfortable. So you really have to work at it. Well, that's when you really get into the flow state on an activity. And so I really like having the time and the mission of writing impactful work. The category I focus on is leadership for innovation and leadership for transformation. And so I find that extremely rewarding to create the space and the platform to get to do that.
So of all the things that you've accomplished in your life, what are you the proudest of?
Being a dad. Easy. It's just been such a rewarding life with my wife and our two boys, and that's just easy to me because it's not really the house that I grew up in, and I always wanted to just have a happy, fun, challenging family.
So let's go back to your youth. Let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into we run into the 20-year-old.
Is this supposed to be therapy for me here today, Joe?
See, everybody says that, and it's like, this is totally free therapy. We're going to work through it.
All right.
We're going to get a break. We're going to get a breakthrough here. So what we're going to do is we're going to put you in a scenario where you run into your 20-year-old self in a dream tonight, and you can give that young version of you a piece of advice based on the wisdom you've gained living your life up to this point. What would you tell that young version of you?
Yeah. At 20, I would have told myself to bet on myself earlier. That I had more of an entrepreneurial orientation than I recognized early on. I always kind of took the safe job and the safe development path at that point. And so at 20, I would have told the 20-year-old John Rossman, hey, bet on yourself earlier. That doesn't mean you necessarily have to be the founder of a business, but put yourself in situations where you are in a more entrepreneurial environment.
So let's depart the therapy here and get to something fun. As a sports fan, if we get off the phone and a time machine's out in front of your house and you could get in there and go back and witness any event in sports history with your very eyes, where are you going?
Wow. That's a great one. So I grew up in Portland. The 1976 Trailblazers played the Philadelphia 76ers in the NBA World Championship that year, and they were down 0-2, and so I wish I had gotten to go to, at least one of those NBA games when the Portland Trailblazers, coached by Jack Ramsey, with Bill Walton and Maurice Lucas and Lionel Hollins and Johnny Davis and Bobby Gross were playing the 76ers.
So did they win that series?
They did. They ended up winning. I forget whether it was 4-2 or 4-3. I think it was 4-2. So they ended up winning, and that's the only championship that the Trailblazers have won.
How poetic is it that it was 76 and it was the 76ers?
Yeah, I mean, we should double check the exact. It may have been 77, 76, 77, but yeah, and that team, all the experts had the 76ers winning it. I think they went on to win the next year. That was a team with Julius Erving and Dawkins on it, and George McGinnis was the power forward, and they were an incredibly dominant team and fully expected to beat the Trailblazers.
So, John, everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
My perception of myself, like what I think I am and what I aspire to be more of, is a contributor and somebody who really adds to the situation, and knows their role. And so, whether that's, with my clients or with my family or at a sporting event, knowing your role and playing that role extremely well so I think I'm very self-aware of kind of like what's the moment and what's needed in the moment. And, back to one of the earlier questions about Peter Drucker. So, his book, The Effective Executive, he starts off the book with 8 practices. And, the first one is that an effective executive asks what needs to be done. And I think that's kind of my version of asking, like, well, what's needed here in this circumstance, and figuring out a way to help in whatever needs to be done in that moment.
So, John, if anyone out there wants to delve into your world, your books, anything pertaining to your life, where is the best place to go?
Well, my website, Rossman Partners, is a great place. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I have a special offer for the listeners here, if I can make that offer.
Sure.
Yeah, so I've got a new book coming out in February of 2024. It's called Big Bet Leadership. And send me an email at info@rossmanpartners.com with the email address for your Kindle account and the name of this podcast, the Neon Jazz Podcast. And I'll select 10 listeners from this podcast and send a free Kindle version of the book when it releases next February.
Oh, man, that's wonderful. John, this has been great, man. Thank you so much. It's been fascinating. I love your story. Thanks for opening up. Best of luck with the new book and with everything as we move forward.
Joe, great talking with you. Nice meeting you today.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.